Good afternoon, race fans. Welcome here as we get set for race number 3 of the season for the NNSCRA Gaming IndyCar Series. We are here for our second road course stop of the season at Long Beach, and we are getting set to find out who's going to continue to climb themselves up through the point standings and who may very well continue to free fall through the standings, because there were a lot of movers and shakers after our second race of the season last week at Phoenix. On the pole position today is going to be Chris Dodd in the 7. Alongside of him is Alexander Rowe in the 2. Chris Dodd having a somewhat decent finish last week at Phoenix. Alexander Rowe finishing out of the race after he was wrecked while leading the race. So certainly looking for some redemption here today. Let's give you the rest of the starting lineup here today. Then you got Eli Bright. He had a top 5 run last week. Either top 5 or just outside the top 5. It was a good run for him at Phoenix nonetheless. He jumped up a number of spots in the standings, which we'll get to in a minute. Alongside of him is our winner from the first race at St. Petersburg, Noah Kars, who also comes in as the points leader. Carson Gum lines up in row 3 alongside of Jake Rogers, Tripantacchio Vernio alongside of Jonathan Zorlin, who finished dead last week at Phoenix. Nathan Ormond will line up alongside of teammate Mason Wood. Then you got Jordan Lopez alongside of Kev Shearer. Matt Haas will start alongside of Pichu London with Zach Flickinger and Jay Jefferson alongside each other. That's Austin LaPlante alongside of Charles Jackson. Johnny Gardner will start alongside of last week's winner from Phoenix, Jacob Rose. And final row will consist of Cole Baker and Matthew Rodriguez. Point standings coming to this race are awfully close, no doubt about that. Noah Kars is still the points leader, but last week's winner, Jacob Rose, has jumped up to second in points, only 1 point out of the top position. Cole Baker is third in the standings. He is 2 points back out of the top spot. Pichu London fourth. He's 7 points out, and 12 points out in fifth is Chris Dodd. The rest of the top 10 coming into this race for the point standings are Matt Haas in 6th, Eli Bright 7th, Charles Jackson 8th, Kev Shearer 9th, and LaPlante dropped all the way down to 10th place. There's the command to fire him up as we will get set for 21 laps of racing here today at Long Beach. Talk about those movers and shakers, drivers that moved up. Eli Bright, Michael Haas jumped up 9 spots in the stands. Kev Shearer 8 spots last week. LaPlante, however, dropped 8 spots in the points, as did Alexander Rowe. And Nathan Ormond dropped 6 spots in the stands. So a lot of drivers jumped up, a lot of drivers fell down, and we got a driver on pit road as we go green. Let's roll! That was Tripantacchio Vernio on pit road. And Alexander Rowe got himself a good start. I would kind of question if he jumped that start, though. Chris Dodd did not really have the race lead when they came to the green flag, and so I don't know if that would be considered a jump by NNSCRA rules or not. And another car on pit road. That is, I think that's the 11. It is Charles Jackson and Tripantacchio Vernio, both on pit lane at the start of this race. I don't know if this is a regular scheduled stop for either one of them, but obviously not good. As Alexander Rowe out in front trying to get redemption for last week's race at Phoenix, where he was leading the race. There was contact between himself, Nathan Ormond, and Zach Flickinger, who were the top 3 at the time out of turn 2, and all 3 wrecked. It was the biggest wreck that we had so far this season. Chris Dodd in 2nd place, and then back in 3rd is Eli Bright. He and Carson Gum were battling for that 3rd position momentarily a little while ago, but that is now settled out with Bright in 3rd, Carson Gum settled in 4th place. There's Vernio returned back to the track. Charles Jackson is just now returning back to the racetrack. And so he will be off the lead lap, coming back onto the racing surface. Vernio would be on the tail end of the lead lap currently. This battle for 3rd, it's not going away. Carson Gum still keeping Eli Bright within striking distance. And we could have a battle heating up for the 5th position momentarily as well. Noah Kars currently in possession of that, but Jake Rogers and Mason Wood right there. This is maybe one of the toughest road courses in which to be able to pass. There's not a whole lot of passing zones here. And you can see that all these drivers, for the most part, are really spread out. And that's almost by design, so that way they can make the corners. And we saw a couple of weeks ago at St. Petersburg when we were watching Austin LaPlante try to get around Noah Cars for the win. Noah Cars was the one determining which line he wanted to run. LaPlante had to switch up his game and not necessarily take the entries into corners that he wanted to. Well, Long Beach is definitely a precision type racetrack. You have to hit your marks just right, and you can't really go outside of that zone without paying the price. So that's why we're not going to see as much for battling here today at this racetrack, which is why qualifying and track position was so important at the beginning of this race. And apparently they call it a clean start with Alexander Rowe and Chris Dodd. Apparently Chris Dodd maybe caught napping there at the drop of the green flag, and Rowe was ready to go because they have not called the 22 to pit road to serve any kind of penalty for jumping the start. So maybe a costly mistake at the very start of this race for one Chris Dodd. Alexander Rowe finishing out of the race last week after a wild barrel roll down the Phoenix back straightaway. Dropped all the way down to 18th in the point standings, and obviously looking to bounce back from that. Trying to pick up his first win of the season. So far, 2 races, 2 winners, 2 different winners. Noah Cars winning at St. Petersburg, and last week Jacob Rose winning at Phoenix. Chris Dodd was slowly reeling in the 22 for the race lead, but not anymore. And we may end up having 3 cars start getting into a battle for second, as Eli Bright and Carson Gum are starting to reel in that 7 machine. Let's find out where our 2 former race winners are currently running. We already know Noah Cars is up inside the top 5, and he may have a bit of a challenge here in a little bit. Jake Rogers there, along with Mason Woods, 6th and 7th. We got to go a long ways back in this field because we saw Jacob Rose did not have the best of qualifying results. There he is. Last time by, he was scored in 16th place, and that's 16 out of 22 drivers. So Jacob Rose really needs a good run here, and obviously, too, with the fact he came into this race only 1 point back out of the points lead from Noah Cars. He would love to get up in the same vicinity as the 4 car. We have a battle going on here. Best battle on the track that's going on between Jordan Lopez in the 14, Matt Haas in the 28, and Lopez will take the position. I don't know who had the spot. Lopez had the spot. That was the battle for the 11th spot, and Lopez hung on to it. And now, Matt Haas will find himself falling into the clutches of the 2 Ganassi cars, Austin LaPlante and Jay Jefferson, who are in 13th and 14th right now. Find any good battles going on here on the racetrack, and right now really none to be seen. That battle for 3rd place, it's like you keep thinking it's going to heat up at some point in time. Carson Gum's been a lot better in turning laps than Eli Bright has. He has closed the distance up numerous times. Tends to overdrive it in a few of these corners, loses ground, and then makes it up again. There you see again losing some ground there. He was about 3 car lengths back. It's now increased to about 4 to 5 car lengths. But you look back here at some other point in time, you'll see that gap close back up to about 3 car lengths once again. So there's certain turns that Carson Gum is much better than Eli Bright, but there's some corners that I think he just overdrives it in his attempt to get up here and get into that podium position. Right now, though, all smooth sailing for one Alexander Rowe. 1.3 seconds in hand over Chris Dodd last time by. This time by, it increased by another 0.6. And Alexander Rowe, can't say he was going to, but he was certainly going to be in the vicinity of winning the race last week at Phoenix. Had a very strong car, actually led the most laps last week at Phoenix with 11. Next highest led 6 laps. So he had a very good car. He just wrong place, wrong time, and got involved in a rather freakish accident that took out the entire top 3 at that moment. Well, this battle for 3rd is back on again. Question is, though, will it culminate into anything, or will Carson Gum overdrive a corner again and lose ground on Eli Bright? Slowly, Eli Bright appears to be closing the distance up between himself and Chris Dodd. separation between those two was about 1.3 seconds last time by, and now it's cut down to 1.2, so he is by a tenth chipping away on Reeling and Chris Dodd. He is, though, losing a lot of ground to the 22 of Alexander Rowe, who I think right now is just laying down qualifying laps. I don't think he even is caring about what the distance is between himself and the 7. He's just out there trying to run laps and win this race. See who's laid down the fastest lap so far here. It's always interesting to find out, especially at road courses, where draft is usually not a thing. And it is Alexander Rowe with the fastest lap so far in this race, 1 minute 0.5. That is 3/10 faster than Carson Gum, who has the second fastest lap at 1 minute 8. Speaking of Carson Gum, he lost a lot of ground. Caution's out, actually. Yellow flag is out. Carson Gum was a long ways back from third place Eli Bright, and I almost wonder if maybe he might have been the reason for the yellow. There's some skid marks there just heading down to the first corner. And this is a big-time caution for Tripentacchio Vernio. Vernio had to come to pit road at the drop of the green flag, and he did remain on the lead lap. You saw he was third fastest lap on the charts. He had nothing but clean racetrack in front of him, so he was doing everything in his power to stay ahead of the leaders, and a very timely caution for him will keep him on the lead lap, and we'll see what he can do here now with this yellow in terms of trying to pick up track position. Not certain if just going back looking through the field we're going to be able to figure out who it was that brought out this yellow flag. So we will step aside, take a look at a replay of what brought out the yellow. First time today, getting close to the halfway point here at Long Beach. And it was our points leader, Noah Kars, who was at the time running in the 5th position. Maybe it was due to tire wear, I'm not certain, because we actually had 2 incidents take place on this lap. We'll look at the second one in just a moment. Let's see if maybe it's a little wheel hop issue. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, wow. You can see the car is drastically out of shape heading into the corner. I think the car wheel hopped on Noah. And, oh, man, that's not exactly a light hit into that wall. And there you can see caution coming out there on that billboard indicating it's a full course yellow. That was some pretty extensive contact on the left side of that machine. You can see the rear wings got some damage as well. So, tough break there for Noah Kars. The points that are coming to this race, we'll have to see if they can get that car repaired, but he may have to bring that car to pit road, and he may lose some very valuable track position as a result. Now, we also had another incident. Kars was running in the 5th position. Carson Gum did have an issue, and he was running in 4th. Let's take a look and see what happened to the 77. This was coming down into one of the latter corners of this racetrack, one of the more heavily braking zone turns as well. And you just see right there, car just snaps around on him. So the only thing I can think, we were here on lap number 9, and the only thing I could possibly think that might have been the issue on this lap for both Noah Kars and Carson Gum is with running so many laps, I would have to think that those rear tires starting to wear out, not allowing nearly as much grip to be able to do in the corners what you were able to do back on laps 1 and 2. And they just overdrive it in the entry of the corner. The rear wheels lock up, they slide, and around goes your rear housing. So that's the only thing I can think of. I don't know if Carson Gum's spin would have brought out a caution, but the caution was already out. So obviously very lucky for the 77 there, and we don't know if the 77 would have brought out the yellow, but the 4 car did. So let's go back now for the restart. Alexander Rowe showing the way, and we should be past the halfway point when we do go back to green. Well, one thing that I usually forget about road courses is normally we don't have that many long pacing laps here for me to be able to go back and look at replays. And so with coming back, we are back under green. Alexander Rowe out in front, and he's now beginning his quest of trying to get ahead by a good margin ahead of Chris Dodd once more. Carson Gum was able to continue despite the semi-spin we saw him have. He's in the 4th position, but Noah Kars did have to bring his car to pit road, and now he finds himself mired way back in traffic, and he's in trouble again. Spinning around once again is the 4 car, and I don't know if that's going to bring out a yellow or not. It doesn't look like it. Local yellow in that portion of the track. He was able to get it going again, but that 4 car for Noah Kars is apparently a handful. And I don't think we've seen our last yellow, or at least our last spin, for any drivers here in the field. There was another car that had an issue in turn 1, it would appear. I don't know who that is. I'm trying to look for a car that may have quite a bit of left side damage, but I don't see one. I mean, you'll see it when Alexander Rowe comes down here. I do not think it's the same skid marks that Noah Kars made that brought out the yellow. But all these cars did not come to pit road too, let's not forget that. So these tires are still worn. Not only that, but under pacing they had a chance to cool, which is going to make them even slicker. Right down here you'll see, right there, those skid marks heading off earlier than Noah Kars did. And our NNSCRA camera crew here will do their best to try and pinpoint who it was that created those skid marks, courtesy of our NNSCRA split cam. So it's looking like handling and grip going to be a big factor in the outcome of this race. Chris Dodd there in second, Eli Bright third, Carson Gumm in fourth, and now Mason Wood has moved up into fifth. Jake Rogers in sixth. Jonathan Zorlin there in 7th, with London 8th, Lopez 9th, and Matt Haas completing the top 10. One driver that I know was certainly very happy to see Noah Kars having some issues is Jacob Rose, with him trying to battle for the points lead. There is Noah Kars, and there is Rose, now up ahead of Noah Kars. So right now, Noah Kars would not have the points lead heading next week. As a matter of fact, right now, I think the points lead would actually belong to Pichu London, currently running in that 8th position. Rose is in 14th. Well, it may actually be Jacob Rose by 1 point over Pichu London as things stand right now. Not too far back from him is the 8 of Cole Baker, came in only 1 point behind Rose, so right now he'd be about 3 points back. So still we have a very close points battle with where our top 4 in the standings are currently running. And then throw into the mix as well Chris Dodd, currently running in that 2nd position. Well, Chris Dodd came in 12 points back out of the points lead, and he's the only driver currently up inside the top 5 in the standings that is running inside the top 5 on the racetrack. Those 5 could find themselves very close together heading into next week's race, which is going to be our 2nd Speedway stop of the season at Texas Motor Speedway. You think Phoenix was chaotic? Well, I don't think you've seen anything yet. Talked about Eli Bright last week having that great run at Phoenix. Bright brought it home in the 3rd position last week at Phoenix International, and right now running again in the podium position. Was one of 2 drivers that picked up 9 spots in the standings last week, jumped from 16th all the way up to 7th in the points coming into this race. Meanwhile, though, Alexander Rowe's car has been very stellar. Chris Dodd's car has also been stellar, but just not nearly as fast as the 22. Alexander Rowe just trying to make these corners, log laps, get as close as he can to the finish of this race. The last thing Alexander Rowe wants to see right now is a caution, although even with the caution coming out here midway through this race, he still got himself a good start on the restart to continue to pull away from Chris Dodd. So I don't know if he really would dread the idea of a late yellow or not. But his car is just so good at the moment, I think he's perfectly fine if this race ends under green flag conditions. Not much battling going on here in the closing stages. Maybe the closest battle's going on from 6th place Jake Rogers on back, where drivers are in the closest proximity. Mason Wood there, along with Jonathan Zorlin and Pichu London, Jake Rogers. There's Matt Haas in the 28. Finished 4th last week at Phoenix. Had that issue with Johnny Gardner in the closing stages of that race. Thought maybe we'd have to keep an eye on the 2 and the 28 during the course of this race, but Gardner's not really been able to fight his way up anywhere close to the top 10. There he is right now. There's Tripantacchio Vernio picking up some spots here. He's been able to get around Matthew Rodriguez as well as Noah Cars. He's currently running in the 19th position on the lead lap. Charles Jackson still a lap down. All 22 cars still running. There's the 4 car. Noah Carr is probably going to want to forget this day. Not a good run for him at all. And don't look now, but I've been monitoring that ticker, and Chris Dodd is doing something he hasn't done all day, and that is closing the gap between himself and Alexander Rowe. So maybe, okay, let's think about this. Maybe with, like I said, the rear tires losing grip, the tires going away, maybe Chris Dodd was saving something and now is trying to put it to good use here in the closing stage of this race. You can see this is about the closest he has been to Alexander Rowe this entire race, not counting them being nose to tail under pacing. Question is, though, does Chris Dodd have enough time, and is there any particular portion of this racetrack that Chris Dodd has figured out that if he can make a move, he'd be able to? At the line, it was 1.3. Now it is 1.1, so he gained 0.2. Only problem for him, though, is he can't keep gaining 0.2. He would need roughly about another 6 laps in order to catch Alexander Rowe. He doesn't have 6 laps. He's got less than 2. And with Alexander Rowe realizing this, you wonder if maybe he's feeling the pressure, maybe trying to drive these corners a little bit harder than he should. He might make a mistake, and if he does, Chris Dodd wants to be there to capitalize. This time by on that camera angle, you can see the distance has grown. It's about doubled between Rowe and Chris Dodd. So maybe Chris Dodd trying one last-ditch effort, realizing that it's not going to work and may have to cede this victory to the 22. Through the final corner, they'll turn and head for home. The white flag will be displayed over the hood of Alexander Rowe's number 22. One more time around. If the yellow flag happens, doesn't matter. We'll race back to the start-finish line. Another 0.3 in hand over Chris Dodd, so I think that's going to be all she wrote unless Alexander Rowe messes up royally on one of these corners. Chris Dodd just trying to be as consistent as possible. 5th in the point standings, could possibly stand to inherit the point lead heading into next week at Texas. Could Chris Dodd in the 7th. As we head through the latter section of the course, Alexander Rowe, you think all the way back to the very start of this race when he timed the green flag perfectly to get the race lead away from pole sitter Chris Dodd. He has not looked back since then. Through the final corner, down the front straightaway. Alexander Rowe will pick up his first win of the season, redemption for last week's race at Phoenix. Rowe will go to victory lane at Long Beach. Chris Dodd brings it home second. That is his first podium finish of the season. Last week he finished at Phoenix in the 13th position. The week before that at St. Petersburg, he finished just outside of the podium in 4th. So first podium finish for Chris Dodd, his best finish of the season in 2nd. And Eli Bright finishes in the podium for the 2nd straight week, finishing in 3rd place. Standings should be official. as Alexander Rowe becomes the third different race winner this season. We went down through the podium. Carson Gum brings it home in a solid run of 4th. This will more than likely move him into the top 10, the points. Mason Wood will finish in 5th. Good run for him after he's had a bad couple of races to start off the year. Jake Rogers in 6th. Jonathan Zorlin finished dead last week. Good redemption finish for him in 7th here this week at Long Beach. Pichu London in 8th. Jordan Lopez in 9th. And Michael Haas will complete the top 10. Austin LaPlante was 11th. Kev Shearer in 12th. Jay Jefferson 13th. Last week's winner, Jacob Rose in 14th. Nathan Orm in 15th. Cole Baker in 16th. 17th place was Zach Flickinger with Johnny Gardner 18th. Tripatacchio Vernio in 19th. Matthew Rodriguez 20th. And the last car to finish on the lead lap, the guy who came into this race as the points leader, Noah Cars. Charles Jackson had early issues, had to come to pit road at the drop of the green flag, lost a lap early and never gained it back. He'll finish one lap down in the 22nd position. But I think it's going to be very close for the point standings heading next week at Texas between Chris Dodd, Jacob Rose, Cole Baker, Pichu London, and Chris Dodd. Maybe even throw Matt Haas into the mix there with a 10th place finish, but I think those top 5 that I mentioned, it's going to be really close, the point standings for them heading into next week's race, which is our second Speedway stop of the season. We're going 2-time stepping in Texas Motor Speedway. That's going to be a wild race. You are not going to want to miss it. But Alexander Rowe picks up the win here today. He becomes the third different winner this season, and he goes to victory lane for the first time this year. Thank you all for tuning in today's race from Long Beach. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to become part of the crew today. We've shown your full finish results, and these are your point standings heading into next week. We'll see you at Texas Motor Speedway as you've been watching a production of the NNSCRA Offline Racing at its best.